Today on AI Actually, OpenAI's playbook for scaling AI, why generalists are winning, and revenue-driven ROI.
So for me, I think it starts with just thinking much more ambitiously about what you can deliver.
Closing that last mile gap is really challenging because you can hit a large percentage of requirements and get most of the things done, but still not have something that's truly useful.
Look, I am sympathetic to IT organizations right now because it's got to feel like completely Wild West, and frankly, it is. All right, welcome everybody. So we're joined by some of the faithful pod crew. We've got Jim, Alon, and Shanti, and we're going to talk about OpenAI. They've been putting out some pretty good content recently, and they put out this white paper called "From Experiments to Deployments: a practical path to scaling AI." And we thought that'd be a great topic. We've got a ton of experience in the real world doing this, and it's something that we find a lot of our clients struggling with, and we're sort of helping them with. So I thought I'd pull some key sort of concepts from that white paper and just have a little bit of a discussion there. And so one of the first things that I sort of took away from the white paper was this idea that the old IT playbook sort of breaks in the age of AI. The idea that a lot of enterprises are trying to run on, I don't know, a 1990s sort of IT playbook, long validation cycles, giant committees, and then they're surprised when they ship something that's sort of obsolete on day one, right? So you can't have quarterly releases when the underlying models are changing every couple of weeks. Do you guys agree? Is the old playbook dead? What does this rhythm sort of look like in the real world? Jim?
Generally, I agree with that premise, but maybe I'd go a step further. The old playbook was sort of about the relationship between IT and the business. And this is a fundamental sort of misunderstanding, is that this is an IT problem. It's an IT and the business relationship problem. And IT, in my view, needs to go much further in owning and understanding the business problem than they ever did before, because so much of this is not an underlying technology question in terms of bringing AI solutions to life or intelligent solutions to life. It's sort of being able to express what the business wants in a functional way in the context of feeding it to the model, et cetera. And we can talk about all that. The other side of it is the business has to go much further than they ever went before. It's sort of in a world where they sort of threw requirements over the wall at IT, that doesn't work anymore. There's a different kind of chasm, and the business has to go much further in embracing the opportunities and that large language models provide, or that generative AI provides, and in understanding how to bring it to life. And right now, they're sort of sitting on one side and IT sitting on the other side, trying to run the old playbook. And the chasm is both of their problems, and both of them have to go much further. React to that a little bit, guys. But I think it's not just an IT problem. I think IT sort of got it wrong. I think they got to go further. But this is not just an IT problem.
Look, I am sympathetic to IT organizations right now because it's got to feel like completely Wild West, and frankly, it is. Unfortunately, some of the instinct is to sort of control, right? And to sort of, oh, you can't use this and you can't use that or whatever. And I think the answer is a little bit the opposite of that, which is, okay, we know everybody's going to use this. Here are the ground rules. You can do this, you can do that, and sort of go from sort of control to much more shifting into enablement. I think that's first a mindset shift that I see. One is the speed that this stuff is moving at is just very hard for large enterprises to sort of even comprehend, to be honest. And so there's got to be just much more emphasis on how do we go fast, how do we stay very nimble, and how do we really start to take advantage of some of these things. And one of the ideas that we've talked about is you've got sort of the technology teams and you've got these business teams, and the technology teams feel like they're going to I want to pick one platform and one model, and I'm going to make it available to the business, and the business is going to do what they want to do. Well, that doesn't work for a bunch of reasons. First of all, there's not one tool right now that, and by the way, if it's right today, it might change next week. So that has to be very nimble. On the business side, they don't have a clue, necessarily. They know what they want to do. They understand the problem really well. They have this domain expertise, which is critical, but they don't understand how to leverage these technologies. So I really think you need sort of these tiger teams where we've talked about forward deployed engineer teams with some mix of technical capabilities and so business acumen and domain expertise, and the vision to sort of go to the next place where this technology could take you. I see very few organizations sort of set up that way. And that's one way I think you could really embrace this technology at the speed that you need to.
Yeah, to steal an analogy from like supply chain, it's a last mile problem where getting something 80% complete using the AI tools that you have available is pretty straightforward and pretty easy. And IT can do that. But actually solving a real business problem, you need to understand that problem really well and what it means for a solution to be good enough to use. And that closing that last mile gap is really challenging because you can hit a large percentage of requirements and get most of the things done, but still not have something that's truly useful. And that's where I think we're going to see a lot of development happening on the agentic side, and the model quality side is really trying to close that gap. How much closer can we get?
Yeah. Maybe I'll take a slightly different direction. The thing that's occurred to me probably more recently is, if you think about who's most productive in this age when AI capabilities are just kind of moving along and giving you more and more power, I think it favors the folks who are more generalists. So if I'm able to think broadly, if I'm able to process, here's the problem, whether it's a business problem or a technical problem, I've got enough of a framework and a mental model for how do you solve for this problem, then suddenly the AI is a great assistant. Like, it sort of shores up the places where I'm weak. It makes me faster in the places where I'm strong, but it's a great teammate. And so in one way or another, you're trying to kind of figure out, okay, what's the team? What's the smallest possible team that allows me to get broad coverage of all the domain knowledge is required to solve a given problem. And that could be a team of one, it could be a team of three, it could be a team of 30, in very complicated areas. But it's very hard to do, like if you're doing it in silos where you're handing off, we did our part, like here's the specs. We built them with AI, now they're very deep specs. And you're gonna hand it to somebody else. Well, they're gonna feed that spec to an AI and the AI is gonna do something with it. And stuff's gonna get, lost in the translation. So where historically I would say, there is, whether it's software development or whether it's project management, there's always sort of specialists who take a lane and operate in that lane. You've got to be able to sort of fuse the people who are working on the stuff enough so that they're sitting, if not physically next to each other, they're very tight in their workflow. And then AI is sort of ambient in that scenario where it's just part of the entire process. It's everybody's relying on it to accelerate and to double check and to create faster higher quality results.
Success in recent years, sort of pre-generative AI, was grounded in having individuals who had tremendous depth in their space. Maybe it was software engineering, or maybe it was sort of functional business context ownership, or whatever. But sort of just that depth that we just had to have. Now we're in a place, and I'm agreeing with you here, Alon, that somebody who's sort of medium depth in their functional understanding and medium depth in their understanding of sort of AI skills and have some depth in a little bit of IT, that person is the glue and just so critical. And this, to your point about, hey, one person who has medium depth in all those things may go a lot further to delivering a solution than a team of three who have great depth and exclusively in one domain or another. And it's what that one individual can do. Just to sort of make one other point here, I think calling something an AI project or what, just sort of core enablement of
Yeah.
our team. Like we want to, and I agree with that. We want to roll out enablement to our organization just to give them environments that are safe and to allow them to build skills. But when we start talking about enterprise use cases, characterizing something, this is an AI project, or how is your AI project going? I think it's a total misnomer. These things need to be characterized based on what the business problem is we're trying to solve, or what the opportunity, we're trying to optimize our supply chain, or, we're trying to sort of, enable revenue lift through this new product. The fact that AI is part of what's going to provide for that, and because of its capabilities to bring intelligence into the problem that we've never brought before, or at least bring intelligence sort of out of the humans into the computer in a way that we've never brought before. That's awesome, but don't characterize it as an AI project, because
I think it's just easier to sell it. It's easier to sell it if it's got AI in front of it.
The hot thing today.
Those
Yeah, you
budgets
got to get
that-
those buzzwords in there.
Yeah, if there's
Yeah.
no AI in front of it, there's no budget for it.
Well, and I think the point you made, like I always thought of, the ideal product team is a team of one. Like one person,
Yeah.
they understand the whole thing, soup to nuts. They can build it, code it, test it, ship it, right? But obviously that hasn't really been possible. Actually possible now. And the one thing we sort of touched on, but it'd be interesting to maybe kick it around with you guys, is what's the impact to organizations? Because if I'm a product manager like last year, my job was, I'm like, cool, I can write specs faster,
Yeah.
I'm a product manager today. Like I'm going way further down the path, right? From spec to, first of all, I'm going to understand the code really well. Then I can write the spec. Then I can probably make a lot of the changes. So it feels like, organizationally, I need to be thinking about the capabilities of people much differently, and be much more aggressive on what I think people can get done if they really lean into this stuff. And it sort of blows apart sort of some of the traditional, I think, organization structures, which is going to be a real challenge, I think, for a lot of business leaders. And I just say that to really get the benefits that we're talking about, you're absolutely going to have to lean into that.
Well, I think traditional timelines are out the window at this point.
Completely.
It doesn't take 6 months to deploy a software project.
No.
It takes 6 months to QA the project and make sure it's working well, but that should be like 5 months of testing. It's just everything has changed in terms of what it takes to get a POC out, to start hardening it, and then to incrementally build on it. A lot more resources now can go into like the QA, the UAT, the hitting all of the actual business requirements that used to be done in functional testing and unit testing. And all of the pieces are, can we get functional code? Well, we can get functional code, but now testing that it actually solves your problem becomes the real issue that you're going to deal with.
So for me, I think it starts with just thinking much more ambitiously about what you can deliver.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'll give you, for instance, we're looking at a segment that we're not in and talking to prospects. And historically we said, great, let's go out and do a little bit of market research and requirements gathering. Let's put together a slide deck. Let's show it and get feedback, and then let's maybe sign up for kind of a focus group, and then let's sign up for some kind of a pilot of and this is weeks or short number of months that you're trying to nail the business case for building a thing. The experience I've had more recently is like, well, if you can imagine what it is that you're trying to solve as the business problem, and you have a decent sense for it, you're building call it the specs and the requirements kind of, in some number of hours, and you're building a prototype in some number of hours, and you're showing it, for the follow-up call, right? So if you have an intro call, you're meeting and sort of nodding your head about, yeah, we understand what the problem is and we're going to solve it. So, a day or two later, you're back on a call and you're saying, okay, here's how we conceptually solved it. And depending on your starting point, if you've got, so now again, it's some of the gory detail. If you've got the basis, like a reference architecture that you already like for solving that problem, and you've got roughly your call the agentic rules that predefined, right, for your coding assistant. I mean, functionality is just coming to life, and it's not coming to life in a formula. Go, okay, I'm not talking about like, doing something in Figma or even like Bolt or Lovable or, where it's like, okay, here's a prototype and it sort of works. I'm talking about, no, this is the underlying architecture you're going to use in a project going forward. You've got, you've got the separation of concerns, and you've got the, strong objects, data types, and the schema. Kind of, that's the thing you're brainstorming at the beginning. That's not the final one, but the architecture from day one is actually an enterprise caliber architecture, because you're borrowing from references that already are tried and true and are running in other projects. And so the crazy thing there is, you're talking about in a couple of weeks, you're already iterated what would have taken you a couple of months, and you're in users hands-on keyboard playing with the stuff, and that becomes a part of your QA process at that point, right? So like, it's not like, hey, we're going to QA the obvious, and we don't want to put it in front of anyone because it's going to be really embarrassing when they find obvious things. You're probably more finding business, like, friction between what the user thought they were going to be able to do and how you design the the user interface. And so that creates just huge acceleration. The other super recent experience I had on top of this is, this was like last night. So 5.2 Pro is available as of yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
Let me go back, and some of the things that took me a bunch of iterations to do. Let me just try it with 5.2 Pro. I mean, this thing like sits in like, half hour later, it says something as opposed to, a few minutes later. But it's like, oh, it like did a lot of research. Like it came, it held in this context enough information to have a very thorough view on how to implement something, where before I may be going back and forth for a couple of hours kind of independently and trying to decide, and maybe not even considering all the facets that I should. So I'm like, okay, there's a new toy here where it's kind of like you're not sure about how you want to do something, and you want somebody to spend a lot of power on processing it, and just kind of give me the plan that I could understand which way I should go. That was a new experience for me. Like, okay,
Right.
I haven't like let it go for an hour and come back and see what it did. Kind of, short of it actually generating code. Like, so this is not code generation. This is just planning, if you will, of like a very detailed how to go about doing something.
Yeah, I've had this experience, and although it sounds like you have too, where it's surprising how much you can get done. I'll tell you a story. I had an example the other day where I'm having to put this presentation together, and I'm thinking, man, I need like a 3-hour block of time to knock this thing out. And I thought, all right, let me just so I'm going to get this done, and I sort of time box it. I'm going to get this done in 15 minutes,
Right. Right.
and actually worked. I mean, I actually was done with my intended final product in about 15 minutes. And so I just continue to find myself, I have to almost change my mindset going into a project of, okay, forget about what you think. Give yourself, you get it 10 times done 10 times faster. And it's shocking to me how often that
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. I think the other thing that happens is you just sort of start to get a feel for what things AI can do well. And so like, it's surprising, like some of the stuff I go, okay, historically we would never build, like in the first pass of the product, we would never build a whole series of, let's say, utilities or robustness or just stuff that comes later when you start doing the polish. And now it's like, well, just put it in the rules file, make sure that it understands that, we want batteries included in this thing. Like we want out of the box product analytics that, in the first pass. And you just get a completely different level of maturity out of, the what used to be prototyping sessions to like, okay, these are more like, version 1 of a product as opposed to something earlier.
Yep.
Now, the funny thing is, though, it's so uneven, is that you end up with something on the screen, like if I was trying to do like some custom UI arrow looking thing, and that took longer. Like I probably spent an hour trying to tweak like, no, I want the edge to be sharper. I want an outline. I want to, and that like the model is just like struggling to do exactly what I had in my head.
Right.
Because it doesn't know how to nudge these things like so slightly, but it could build like, the 90% of the functionality the same amount of time that it took me to like, make an outlined arrow show up in that way.
So one of the topics in the white paper was this idea of around fluency and building sort of an AI literate workforce. I mean, Alon, you're into this stuff every day. Everybody on this call is on it every day. Jim and Shanti, what weigh in a little bit on, all right, how do we build an AI literate workforce that people that have the insights that Alon has, and then sort of can bring them into the enterprise? What's your
I mean,
perspective
I
on that?
think part of it's a mindset shift. Like you've got to be curious and you have to want to
Yeah,
experiment and try things. There isn't a this is the right way to do it. I can learn it once and it will stay that way. It's
that's right.
going to change. It's going to change really frequently. And to be fair, that just weirds some people out. They aren't ready for that. They don't have that kind of like continuous learning mindset where they always want to be doing that. But if you do, you're absolutely going to be that 10x engineer because there's so much you can do and it keeps changing. I've got the same personal project that I haven't been able to complete for going on a year and a half, 2 years now. But every 3 months, I start from the beginning, like, give it the same style prompting and say, how much further can AI get now than it could 3 months ago? And we're getting closer every time. There's still some integration issues because like authorization across services is still a problem, but we're getting there. Everything I'm going to get there without having to like keep having these long sessions. One of these days, I'll be able to give it the initial specs and something will run with it and go.
Um, Pete, I know you're a fan of Crossing the Chasm. It only comes up 3 times a week in conversations with us. Um, AI world, non-AI world, I don't know that anything changes about the bell curve that is described there in terms of innovators,
Mm,
early adopters, the
yeah.
the next wave,
It's
the
just
early.
human behavior. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it sort of is what it is, and it's sort of human nature. Um, and AI presents sort of a ton of fun for those innovators and early adopters right now. But we know the values there. We're seeing it. We got to be tight about it in terms of enterprise use cases. I do think there are things that we're seeing that we're working with organizations on, and that we're seeing companies work with that sort of try to push people along that curve. Even we do it within our own organization and things of channels to share things like our own Gen AI Nerd Out channel and some of the learning channels. And I think there is an obligation by companies, even departmentally, to a do that end user enablement and as much as possible facilitate those people who are the innovators and the early adopters to get in front of it. Then the question is, okay, how do we get them to sort of pass along those learnings to the rest of the group? There's a lot going on out there in organizations from a standpoint of designing their incentive systems, designing sort of their evaluation of how they sort of look at their employees, to sort of pick up AI, to share it. I think there's a lot more to happen there. This is an organizational change question about how you drive the behaviors, and those organizations that are embracing some of those behavioral modification sort of tools and techniques are going to benefit from it. But there's still human nature in this that is a challenge to overcome. And I don't think the org change group, if you will, has figured this out exactly yet. But man, those groups that are figuring it out earlier, I've talked about this before. We have the opportunity in what we do at Answer Rocket to work with mid-cap clients, mid-sized companies, and large organizations. And there's an advantage that I don't think we've ever seen before, potentially for mid-sized organizations to take a leap forward. And those that are sort of embracing as much as possible this learning curve, and then how it translates from individual productivity to enterprise use cases. That I mean, that's how the story is going to be driven. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would just maybe add two little things. One is, look, it's going to be a lot different. Your organization is going to treat this stuff much differently if your CEO and the leadership is saying, "Hey, we heard about this AI thing, and we should probably do something about it." To the CEO that walks in and says, "Hey guys, let me show you this app that I vibe coded over the weekend. That's sort of tracking our performance or something." Right? There's this idea if the leaders are going to have to lead and sort of demonstrate
100%.
and model this behavior. And the other thing that just sort of hit me, Alon, you talked about generalists, and Shanti, you talked about curious, and I thought, oh, that's who you need to be hiring. You need to be hiring the curious generalists as opposed to hiring for, oh, you have all these skills, right? Because you can learn, by the way, you can learn so much so quickly. I talked to Jim, I was like, this technology reminds me of the scene in The Matrix where, Neo's like, oh, I know Kung Fu, you can, you can get up to speed on just about anything very
Yeah.
quickly if you know how to use these tools.
All right. Let me throw a counter example at you. Just because to stay balanced. Without naming any names, I guess.
Are they on this call?
Yeah, if we're on this call.
You guys are safe.
Okay.
So we're building a product, and there's this there's sort of this technology barrier, I guess I would say. At some point, when you're vibe coding something, if you don't really understand the code that it's writing at all,
Right.
it all seems pretty good. Like there's no notion of like, hey, this makes sense. Like, and to me, like, generally speaking, when I'm reading a plan and I'm like, okay, you got basically the general stuff right. There is a point at which, though, when stuff gets written,
Right.
and in a particular case where the technique that the AI decided to use would have made things really inefficient as the data grew in scale. Not at all obvious, though. At the small data set that you're playing with
In
when you
demo
build it.
time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you're not technical, it's like, oh, looks like it's getting
seems
some
fine.
records, it's doing
You
some
don't know the difference.
manipulation.
Right.
And it's like, no. If you do that, the minute you hit like, 1,000, records in this thing, it's, like the algorithm itself is going to be spinning its wheel for like, this is a screen UI. It's going to spin its wheel for like 30 seconds. And your response time should be under a second in this scenario. And there's some, and so like the only thing was like, the AI wasn't, it was prioritizing something in the requests around like how to do it that had nothing to do with scale. Now, and so it's easy to inject a whole bunch of code like that without ever knowing that you're creating that problem.
Right.
And so this, so it's easy. I'd say, if you're curious, that's a great start, and you could teach yourself, and you can build all kinds of interesting things. I think we're going to have a lot of slop, basically prototypes being built because that's what they are.
Don't you think you could?
Between that prototyping and saying, oh, we're on a trajectory to build a product where it's important that the technical underpinning is right, and it's still going to take some degree of of review to make sure those things are aligned. I'm sure all that will get quite a bit easier. You have your architectural agent that can review and say, hey, these are the trade-offs you're making, and so on. So somewhere along the way, it's not necessarily about the human beings having to know all this, but
We're still going to need engineers.
Yeah.
we're
Good
definitely
engineering doesn't go away.
we're going to need engineers, but the most productive engineers are going to be able to lean into the whole stack and be inclusive of what problem am I trying to solve and understand it deeply. I think non-engineers will have the challenge. Yeah, so the challenge flows both ways, right? Non-engineers have the challenge of understanding the technology better. Engineers have the challenge of understanding the domain better.
Right. But the gist, I think, is the time cycles for this stuff shrinks just dramatically. So the next topic, I just want to sort of shift to the next one in the white paper, Jim, and this one sort of right up your alley, and it talks a little bit about ROI and the idea that ROI is sort of shifting from, I saved some money, so cost savers, to how do I generate revenue? How do I create new products? How do I create some very significant value beyond just cost savings? How do you see that? How are your clients sort of thinking about that and talking about it?
Well, first of all, everyone wants to create the self-funding roadmap. And that's a conversation that we always have with clients. And, it's a good sales pitch, but I think it's extremely plausible right now. And, fortunately or unfortunately, cost savings often comes back to a labor question. How can we bend the cost curve there? The sort of intelligent systems, where does this either sort of allow us to not hire additional labor but continue to grow the business, or where does it offer the opportunity to take some cost out? I think that, to say we're moving from one sort of mindset to the other, I don't quite agree with. I think it's an and I think that's the conversation that we get into. What's fascinating is we have run into clients who have said, hey, in their business, they're seeing revenue opportunities, and they don't know how to sort of scale it. So they're coming back and saying that the first question now is no longer just the cost takeout. So again, I don't see it as we're moving from one to the other. I see it as an and, but I see most senior leaders now are asking the and question because they're seeing the revenue opportunities that this may unlock, which is awesome, right? That's the sort of message that gets people excited, as opposed to this, where can we sort of take labor out of our business? So I think it's both. And I think the opportunities are there, and I think the executives are seeing both right now.
Yeah, if you're imagining a world where intelligence is cheap and abundant, there are all kinds of new products and services just about anyone can offer on top of whatever they're doing today. And so you start with that mindset of of the universe of things that I do, which things benefit the most from abundant intelligence that's online and ready to go at any time, and that creates the ability to to start thinking about new offers and new ways of doing business. It's probably best done by thinking of a few examples, like in scenarios, but the historical pattern of I can't talk to every one of my customers the way I want to talk to them, because they, each customer ideally would be treated individually. And if I can treat each customer as an individual, knowing their exact issues, their concerns, I could improve the service that I provide them, right? And so there's if you're in the business of a help desk, obviously there's, becoming cost efficient at doing that. But if you're in the business where every interaction with the customer is an opportunity to, surprise and delight them with something additional, and some of those things generate revenue behalf, right? That's a great intersection to be in, where suddenly the addition of intelligence to that conversation, where the customer is no longer waiting on hold, the customer is not waiting for somebody to return some information to them. They're able to very quickly get the personalized response they need and move through the process to get to some results that they're looking for.
So if we try to sort of wrap this into maybe final thoughts, you're in you're in an elevator with a senior executive that just trying to describe, like, here's how to be thinking about this, and here's how to talk, sort of approach the organization with it to get real business results. I'll go around the horn, but Alon, I'll start with you. What's your sort of elevator pitch on here's how you need to be thinking about this?
How many floors are we traveling on?
As many as you like. I mean, it's a big building if you need it.
Empire State Building size elevator?
There you go. Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I'd say, start by imagining some future world that you want to live in, that that you want your company to be part of, some future view of the world, and imagine it then going backwards from there, right? So, because the aspirations have to be big in this use case for it to ultimately be worth it, I think, for major shifts. Now, you could do lots of smaller things, but if I'm talking to senior leadership and I'm saying, okay, where do you want to be, 3 to 5 years from now, let's say, and how ambitious are you being about those goals? And then work from there to say, how does technology fit into that?
Yeah, I might start with, how are you currently measuring the success of your business? What are these metrics that you care about? And what would it take to start improving them? AI is a great enabler for some of them, not a good enabler for others, but let's move the levers we can move using the tools that we have, with the understanding that it's just going to keep getting better in certain areas.
So I've said this before. There are a lot of people who sort of view AI as sort of some magic wand right now. And we've got to, we forget how we think about this all the time. We talk about it all the time. We forget sort of where some of our clients are, the potential clients that we talk to, about their journey and their maturity in this topic. I think a way to frame it for them is AI gets work done. It may be work that you're already doing. That's fine. It may be work that you wish you could get to. Let's think about what you would love to be doing more of, that AI may be able to help you scale. Or it may allow you to introduce new products or services to your customers that you simply are not able to today, again, because you can't scale in a way to do that work. let's talk about those domains and present it in terms of the business. What work do you want to get done more of? What work would you like to be able to do to deliver a new product or capability to your customers? Let's start from that, the dialogue. And that's going to, some things are going to fall out of that very quickly that will deliver ROI to you. And then let's not get hung up on sort of all of the technology of it or what models what or sort of what's going on right now. But let's think about it from a work getting done standpoint.
All right. And so since I am hosting, I get the last word. So here you go. Here's my here's my take. I wrote down one, set the example. Like your team is not going to embrace this stuff unless you're embracing it. And I mean, literally you should be digging into, starting to use these tools and really sort of take them to places where you're not quite even sure you could go. I say 2, prepare to really reorganize your company around it. If you let these things sort of continue to take place in their silos, you're not going to get the benefits that are really possible. And I guess the final thing I would say is you need to be thinking well beyond what you probably currently believe is even possible.